Now, at first glance, you might think that the weather doesn't look that interesting this week. That's certainly what I thought after coming back off 2 weeks of leave. Just looks like typical British summertime. But actually, if you delve in a little bit deeper, there are actually some interesting things potentially happening this week and as we head into next week. One of which is the potential for a named storm. Yes, you heard me right. We had Storm Lillian last year, quite late in the season, so it's not uncommon to see kind of a named storm later as we head further into summer. So we're going to take a look at the chances of that. And also, we could see potentially some quite hefty thunderstorms this week too. So a couple of interesting things that we can sink our teeth into for this week's deep dive. So hello and welcome. If you are new here, make sure you give this video a like and make sure you're subscribed. And also, you can catch our content on Spotify. Who knew? You can catch Met Office content on Spotify. We're not singing, don't worry, it's just the general everyday videos that you see on YouTube. But if you fancy taking a look on a different app, we're on Spotify as well. We're across all social media, WhatsApp, X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. You cannot get rid of us, so make sure you go take a look there if you haven't already. And of course, for those of you who join us every week, welcome back and welcome to this week's deep dive. So let's get into it, shall we? So yes, what's actually been happening with the weather over the last week or so and what's dominating the weather this week and mostly into next week as well? Well, it's all thanks to this area of high pressure just situated to the southwest of the UK in the Atlantic. And for those of you who might already know, this is actually the Azores high. It stretches up all the way from the Azores Island, a big area of high pressure, and it's stretching its way just to the west of the country here. Now, what we find is, unfortunately, because it kind of sits to the southwest through most of the week, it doesn't actually bring anything super settled. It does a little bit. We've mostly got kind of typical British summertime weather, as I've already said. We've got some bright interludes, some showers, but we haven't got that high pressure sat over the UK, bringing us kind of blue skies every day. There are some caveats to the weather. Just to the north of this, at times, we get frontal systems swinging in that northwesterly flow, which we now have dominating the UK weather. So if I just swing this forward as we head into tomorrow, notice we can see that happening. So here's the high, and then we've got a frontal system just starting to edge into the west. And with that northwesterly flow, it's quite warm. It's going to start to get quite humid Wednesday and Thursday. So that brings us a risk of showers. We're going to delve into that a little bit deeper in a moment because some of these showers could be quite heavy and possibly thundery. And there's a little bit of uncertainty as to exactly where the showers are going to hit, as is usually the way with a showery kind of setup. But nevertheless, with this frontal system, more organised band of cloud, possibly some light showery outbreaks of rain starting to push into the west later Wednesday and into Thursday, and then eventually starting to creep in. It's starting to fade. It's quite a weak feature, particularly as it starts to move its way inland. So by early Thursday morning, yes, there could be some more clouds, some showers pushing into Wales and parts of southwest England. But as that system kind of fades away, that just indicating that it's a weakening feature. But still, the Azores high sat to the west, bringing in slight ridge of high pressure to the west of us. And that pretty much sits there all the way as we head into the weekend. But once again, we can see by these pink colours, these white arrows, that's the jet stream. A slight strengthening to the north of the Azores high. That creates low pressure to the north of this too. So as we head later into the weekend, after that ridge on Saturday, into Sunday, once again, we see another system swing in towards the northwest. So the first half of the weekend actually looks okay, but by Sunday, we could start to see some cloud outbreaks of rain, possibly some breezy weather too, start to push into the northwest, affecting Scotland, Northern Ireland, possibly northern parts of England as well. But the Azores high is still remaining largely dominant across central and southern parts. So probably the best of the weather here as we head into Sunday. I also just want to draw your attention to the jet stream because it does become quite significant when we chat about things later. I've already hinted at the possibilities of a named storm, and I just want to emphasise that that is a very low probability at this point, probably around 10% chance, but we are going to look at why. But the jet stream here, we can see is kind of situated just to the northwest of the UK. This quite strong segment of the jet. That means the Azores high is allowed to build to the north of it. Don't forget the jet stream is kind of that boundary between that cooler Arctic air and then that milder, warmer, moist tropical air beneath it. And what we do find sometimes is that areas of low pressure just to the east of the US or east of Canada can sometimes be picked up by these areas of, by the jet stream, by these areas of stronger winds high up in the atmosphere. And depending on the ingredients, depending on where exactly those areas of low pressure sit, they can be picked up by the jet stream. And if they move over to the colder side of the jet, so the northern side of the jet, sometimes we can see cyclogenesis take place, so rapid deepening. But we need a few other ingredients as well to make that happen. So there's the potential for a setup similar to this to take place early into next week. But we'll talk about that in a moment. I'm going to make you wait for that one. So let's focus on the weather this week to start off with. So let's take a look at the details. So I'm going to skip ahead to Wednesday because by the time this video goes out, Tuesday's almost over. So Wednesday actually is going to be a fairly decent day for many of us. We're not going to totally escape the showers. You can almost actually at this point see 3 zones of weather. So across northeastern England, East Anglia, parts of central and southern parts of England, you can see that cloud, and that cloud at times is going to be thick enough to produce some showers. They should be fairly isolated. You're probably going to be quite unlucky if you catch any of them, and they should be rather light to moderate. Then if we move just to the west of this kind of zone of weather, you can see almost clear skies. So across parts of Cornwall, parts of Devon, parts of Wales as well, northwestern parts of England, also through across central parts of Scotland, through into the Scottish borders. There's that kind of slightly drier wedge of air. So by the time you reach tomorrow afternoon, there's definitely going to be some sunshine around. And then to the west of this, once again, as that system that I showed you earlier starts to push its way through some thicker cloud, possibly producing some light outbreaks of rain across Northern Ireland, some showers. Western parts of Scotland as well could start to pick up those light outbreaks of rain. So on Wednesday, there are going to be some brighter interludes, some sunshine around, perhaps a bit more cloud across eastern areas, but as things start to warm up, we're likely to see some breaks in that cloud as well. So a bit of a mix of weather on Wednesday, but nevertheless, it's not going to be any heavy downpours or anything like that. Thursday, however, is going to be quite a different day for many of us. So you can already see these brighter returns across the south here. So yes, heading into Thursday, there is a risk of showers. Some of these showers could be quite heavy, possibly even turning quite thundery, and you can probably feel it in the air sometimes when things start to warm up. It starts to turn quite humid. It almost feels like a thunderstorm is on its way, and for all you metheads there, you'll know what the signs are, you know what kind of clouds you'll be looking for. The only thing about Thursday is this model here. This is our UK model that we use at the Met Office. It's showing a lot of these showers quite spread across parts of the south, some across East Anglia, eastern parts of Scotland, northeastern England. And there's a little bit of model variability even at this lead time with the exact location of these showers. I'll show you in a moment. A lot of models are actually keeping these showers to the far east. So still a little bit of uncertainty as to exactly where those heavier showers are going to be, where those thunderstorms could possibly lurk. So there is talk here at the Met Office potentially about some warnings. It's unlikely today just because we're still a little uncertain as to exactly whereabouts they're going to be. There's possibility that we could see a warning tomorrow. Keep an eye on our website, across our social media channels for those, but there's also a chance that actually the signal might take a bit of a downturn tomorrow, and then we don't see any warning. So it's definitely a watch point. The main watch point for this week is where those thundery showers are going to be and how intense they're going to be, and if that's going to lead to a warning. But away from these kind of thundery showers, Northern Ireland, central parts of England, parts of Wales, once again, probably seeing quite a decent day on Thursday. So once Thursday's over, there's still a chance heading into Friday of some of those showers lingering on once again across the southeast. There could be still some remnants of cloud. But what we'll start to see on Friday is a slight shift in our wind flow. So rather than that more of a northwesterly flow, we're starting to see a shift in our winds to more of a northerly. And that starts to bring in some of that fresher, cooler air as well. So if you're not a fan of the humidity from the north on Friday, we'll start to see that fresher air, that cooler air moving through. The warm, humid air probably lingering for a time across the south, so still probably going to be quite warm and muggy there, along with the risk of those heavy showers still. But otherwise Friday, once again, there'll be plenty of dry weather around once those showers move through. And for the weekend, I know many of us are on the summer holidays, but if you're unlucky like me, you'll still be working and still looking forward to the weekend. And Saturday actually looks fairly decent for any weekend plans. Lots of dry weather. Once again, as I showed you earlier, that next system starting to push its way through into the northwest. So more clouds, some light outbreaks of rain moving through here. The rain looks like it's probably going to stay to the far northwest for most of the day. So it might just be that cloud starting to thicken up, makes any sunshine more kind of hazy. But for many of us, it should remain dry, particularly across England and Wales. And then it's Sunday where that system really does start to shove its way into the country. So thicker clouds, some outbreaks of rain, and these potentially could be quite heavy as well. So another watch point for the second half of the weekend. Then I just want to talk a little bit around temperatures. So let's take a look at what those are doing. Once again, not super interesting. Temperatures are around about average for the time of year, but it's certainly going to feel warm across the south. And as I say, Wednesday and Thursday, temperatures not too different. Highs around 24-25 degrees, particularly across southern and southeastern parts. But as I say, that the humidity starting to increase, that warm, muggy feel really starting to increase, particularly on Thursday, and that could lead to those heavy showers. So it's not going to feel particularly comfortable on Thursday, but as I say, Friday we can start to see, even across central areas, that fresher air coming through, potentially still staying quite mild and muggy across the far south, and then Saturday likely feeling fresher for all. But it's just not going to feel quite as muggy. It's still going to be feeling warm in the sunshine on Saturday with highs of 23-24 Celsius. Even across the north with highs reaching high teens, low 20s, it's still gonna feel fairly nice. So as I already mentioned at the beginning, there's not loads going on, but those thundery showers on Thursday are certainly a watch point. So let's investigate a bit more about those. So on my left here, we've got something I actually only discovered this morning is a thing. It's called a confetti plot, which is really fun. And this is from MogReps on the left, so showing where members of that model, so model runs, are showing, are kind of indicating where those possible showers could be. So once again, central, southern parts, but particularly around the London area, parts of Sussex, Kent, across the southeast, East Anglia. That's really where it's showing the bulk of those showers with those more kind of red purpley colours. But also, once again, eastern Scotland, northeastern parts of England, there's also the potential for those showers there. Now here's an earlier model run from this morning across using our UK model that we use here at the Met Office, and notice it's got a bit more, it's actually showing 3-hour accumulations of rain, and it's showing it a bit more widespread across Devon and Cornwall, Exeter for example, where Met Office HQ is. It's indicating some showers there, whereas actually if we take a look at MogReps, it's not really got much of a signal across the southwest for any kind of intense showers. The only well, it does kind of agree across eastern Scotland, northeastern parts of England, that there'll be showers there. So they agree, the model's kind of agreeing there that northern areas could potentially see some of those showers. But it's really showing a bit more of a broad area of those intense showers, southern parts of Wales as well. It's indicating could see some showers there. So still a little bit of uncertainty there as to the exact location, which, as I said earlier, is why we're not seeing a warning quite yet. We just want a little bit of more of agreement there with model runs in order for a warning to be issued. And here we have, once again, the UKV model, so the model that was just on my right there. But these are earlier model runs. So we've got the 3Z run, the 6Z run, and also the 9Z run here on the far right. And there's a slight indication, if you kind of look at the detail, earlier model runs really having that intense rainfall across central parts of Wales, central parts of England. With earlier model runs, it does start to push it southwards, and then more recent model runs, it's just starting to edge those intense rainfall totals across eastern areas, so where we could see those intense showers. So it looks like we're starting to see those models align a little bit more with model runs, more recent model runs. So a chance tomorrow we could see a bit more agreement, and if the showers do still look like they could be this intense, then, as I say, there is the potential for a warning to be issued. But of course, we will update you if that does take place. So thundery showers on Thursday is definitely a watch point, but otherwise the weather it's fairly benign and there's not too much going on. But obviously it's still going to be quite warm, it's going to be quite humid, and with that kind of weather we do tend to get thundery downpours. And it's not just in the UK, it's also parts of Europe that we've seen quite intense thundery showers, and that does seem to be the case over the next few days. And I just want to kind of take a little bit of a look at why that is as well. So I've shown you already, as we took a look at the synoptic pattern, we've got the Azores high really dominating the weather, and just taking a look at some of the things I'm going to show you on the screen here and also things I've looked at earlier in the day, it does look like that Azores high is sticking with us. It almost looks a bit like a blocking pattern. It's not really changing, and yet it's kind of creating quite changeable weather just because it does sit still to the west of us, and that means those areas of low pressure can still swing in from the north or northwest and still can bring some changeable weather into the northwest. So that's when we start to see troughs moving through areas of low pressure, so some showery rain like what we could see on Sunday, but then ridges of high pressure build and it turns dry and bright, and then once again another trough moves through. So that's why I'm starting to hate that word changeable, but that really is the best way to describe it. Ridges of high pressure, troughs, so showers, dry, showers, dry. And that's all because of this area of high pressure just sat to the west of us. This is pressure anomaly, so the pressure difference compared to normal, and these darker pink colours showing that pressure is higher than normal across western areas. And that's just kind of showing, almost looks like a pink egg, just showing where that Azores high is going to be sitting. And where this Azores high starts to build, that's normally where we find the jet stream, just to the north of this. That high pressure builds to the south of it, and to the north of it, that's where low pressure systems move through. And with this kind of setup, those low pressure systems will be swung in by the jet stream, and where that jet stream dips, where we can see that boundary between the warm and cold air, we can kind of see that that lower pressure difference here just to the east, so that's where it's kind of swinging down any low pressure systems. And because of this, we do tend to get low pressure systems moving into northern, northeastern parts of Europe. That's the kind of setup we've seen over the last week or so. And here we have temperatures, so because those low pressure systems, more cloud, we don't see that intense heat building quite as much. So we've actually had, this is temperature anomaly once again, so temperatures compared to normal for this time of year. We've actually had fairly cool temperatures across northern and eastern parts of Europe. And it's all because of that dip in the jet stream where that high pressure is blocked, creating that dip, creating low pressure systems to move through. We've had some quite intense thunderstorms here, so some quite gusty winds, frequent lightning, some large hail in these kind of areas. And still over the next couple of days, northern parts of Italy, parts of Germany, still at risk of seeing those quite intense thunderstorms. But obviously further east, across Turkey, across Greece, we've had above average temperatures, really hot, dry conditions, creating those quite devastating wildfires. So there really is that contrast across Europe at the moment, with temperatures actually above average across the UK. So with that pressure building across the UK, bringing in those low pressure systems, dropping those temperatures, we can still get quite intense thunderstorms because the land across Europe is still quite warm. That allows the air to rise, it condenses, creates clouds, creates those cumulonimbus clouds when that heat is intense, and creates those thunderstorms. And as a result of this, here's our precipitation anomaly, so precipitation compared to normal, where that Azores high has sat, it's been drier than normal. Where those low pressure areas have moved through, it's been wetter than normal across many areas of Europe. So northern and eastern parts of Europe, once again Germany, Italy, many areas seeing actually some quite intense precipitation, so more than you'd usually see at this time of year. So thunderstorms are actually impacting not just the UK, but other areas of Europe as well. So I think it's just quite interesting seeing those different kind of weather patterns and how it all links together and creates quite a contrast across parts of Europe. Now, what about looking further ahead? Well, it still, as I say, looks like we're going to be dominated by that Azores high, just sitting to the west of the country. We might have to zoom in here, it's a little bit small, but we've got pressure anomaly to the top here. In the middle, we've got temperature anomalies, and just on the bottom row here, we've got precipitation anomalies. So this first column here is this week up until the 3rd of August, then the following week, and then the 3rd week. So we can see that Azores high, it's still dominating, but what it does, it slowly doesn't become quite as intense, and it's slowly shifting its way eastwards as well. So that once again is pushing any low pressure systems that drop down to the east of it. Once again, those will be pushing eastwards as well. And that has an add-on effect to the kind of weather we'll see. So taking a look at temperatures, those cooler temperatures across northern and eastern parts of Europe, eventually, obviously still being 2 to 3 weeks away, this could change, obviously we know that already, but this the bigger pattern is indicating that as that pressure system shifts eastwards, we'll start to see things warming up in 2 to 3 weeks across parts of Europe, and we won't see those below average temperatures here. And along with that kind of shift eastwards, we'll start to see that kind of change in the precipitation anomaly as well. So things starting to become drier than average. So we'll start to see less of those intense thunderstorms across the UK and likely across northern and eastern parts of Europe as well. Now, if the Azores high does kind of sit in this kind of location, you might start to get a bit of, obviously, high pressure moving around in a clockwise direction, might start to get more of a northeasterly, perhaps southeasterly flow of air. And if we do start to see things warming up across Europe, there's the potential for that warm air to then start to be dragged towards us here in the UK. After having a look at temperatures earlier in the day, it doesn't look like we're set for any kind of intense heat waves, but there is some signal that temperatures will start to warm up in the next couple of weeks or so. And this is probably linked to this kind of change in setup with that pressure moving eastwards and potentially a change of our wind direction and picking up those warmer temperatures off Europe. But still a few weeks away, still a lot to play for. So at this moment in time, it really is too soon to say. And as it stands, temperatures still across the UK are sticking around average, if not a little bit warmer across the south. So it's really interesting, I think, to see how the kind of jet stream can link to the weather here, and it's all to do with pressure, precipitation, temperatures, and it's all linked together, not just here in the UK, but across Europe as well. Not only this, but we do start to see a link in our weather at times across parts of the US. And I'm sure if you are a keen watcher of us here during the deep dives, I'm sure we've spoken before about named storms, stormy areas or areas of low pressure being dragged up close to the US, being picked up by our jet stream and moving towards us here in the UK. And there is a signal that potentially, as we head into next week, this could happen again. Once again, I'm going to stress it's probably around a 10% chance that we see an actual named storm. With areas of low pressure and for cyclogenesis to take place, you need all the ingredients to really come together at the exact right time, particularly at this time of the year. But as I said, we had Storm Lillian around this time last year. I think it was August. Yeah, it was August last year. So we can get storms kind of at this point in summer, but it's not totally common. It can happen, however. And there are some model runs indicating that if all those ingredients come together at the right time, there is the potential for perhaps a storm. It may not even elevate into a storm. It could just be strong winds. It could just be a frontal system moving through. There might not be enough power there to kind of generate a full actual low pressure system and thus turning it into a storm. I'm going to try and explain briefly why there is a chance. So it's really the European model actually has shown over the last few days an area of low pressure starting to move in to the northwest of the UK. This is the UK just here. Here's the Azores high here. And as we move further west, this is just the US and moving into parts of Canada. Here's Iceland here. Sorry, it's a bit, you might have to tilt your head to the left here. I probably should have rotated that a little bit, sorry. But hopefully you can just about navigate whereabouts we are. And what we have close to the coast of the US, we just have these slight areas of low pressure here indicated just off the coast. And don't forget the jet stream is that boundary between that cooler air and that warm tropical air. And what we find as we head further into the future, so this is for midnight on Saturday, and moving forward into midday Sunday, now here's that area of low pressure just being picked up on the kind of left side of that jet, on the cooler side of the jet, just being picked up by a jet stream and then hence moving forward towards the UK. So if we have this take place, so we'd need that warm tropical air to the south, we'd need that area of low pressure to be picked up on the left jet exit. That's where we undergo potentially some quite deep rappening, some cyclogenesis, and we also need kind of a trough feature to the north. So they're the three main ingredients that we would need for this to take place. And as the jet stream moves this area of low pressure towards the UK, if it spins up enough, press the right button, then we could start to see this area of low pressure just to the northwest of the UK. So that'll bring in cloud, heavy outbreaks of rain, and notice there's quite a few isobars on this chart as well, so some strong winds too. But we need all those ingredients to come together in order for this to take place. And actually, there's a few model members and recent model runs as well of the European model showing this. The global model that we use at the Met Office, not so much. There are some members indicating it, but the majority of members really are showing that actually it's probably just going to be high pressure. Still that Azores high just to the west, creating those changeable conditions, particularly in the northwest of the country. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we'll either have a low pressure system or nothing at all. It could just bring in some strong winds. It could just bring in some outbreaks of rain towards the northwest. As I said earlier, probably around a 10% chance of a named storm, but impactful winds, probably a bit higher, around 30% chance. So it's definitely a watch point as we head into next week. But still a few more model runs to take a look at before we get to that point, and still need a little bit more agreement within those model runs and through different models as well in order to really predict what's going to happen there. But definitely something worth keeping an eye on for next week. But this week it really is those thunderstorms that we need to keep an eye on. So what else did I want to talk about? Yes, thunderstorms. As you know, if you're a fan here, I do sometimes like to go into a little bit of my background as a forecaster and go into a little bit of theory. And I am a big fan of tephigrams. I wasn't when I first saw them, when I first started learning about them in university. I think they look quite intense when you first look at them. There's lots of lines and lots of different things going on. But actually, as forecasters, they really are so great. And once you kind of get to grips with them and understand them, you do learn to love them. And I just thought I'd go through a little bit of theory. Obviously, we talk about models and model runs all the time, but what would happen if everything shut down? We didn't have any models, we didn't have any internet. What would we actually do? How would we be able to forecast the weather? How did they do it back in the day? Well, tephigrams are a really good tool in order to do that. So this is one taken for kind of Thursday late afternoon in the London area. And if you're not familiar with these, this solid blue line, as we move our way up the graph, this is going high up into the atmosphere. This solid blue line is the temperature of the atmosphere as we go higher. And in order to determine temperature, we'd have to follow these faded green lines down, and here's temperature along the bottom axis here. So if I wanted the temperature here, I'd follow it down. Oh, I keep doing that. I'd follow it down and I'd read off the temperature here. So this solid blue line is temperature as we go up in the atmosphere. We've got this dashed blue line, and that's our dew point temperature as we go up into the atmosphere. So the temperature the air would have to cool to in order to become saturated and water vapour to be created. So essentially, the closer these lines are together, the moister the air is, and the further apart they are, the drier the air is. And what we can do is we can calculate from using these lines, these temperatures as we go up into the atmosphere, we can calculate what cloud we're going to get, how thick the cloud's going to be, is that cloud going to produce any showers, is it going to produce any hail, or is it going to produce any lightning? So what I did before I popped this on the screen, I created what we call a Norman's point construction. So this is following these lines here and this here, where there's a little blue X, hopefully you can see, might need to zoom in again. This is what is called our lifting condensation level. So essentially when we start to reach that point, that's roughly whereabouts our cloud base is going to be. And this is calculated through maximum temperature of the day. So I've gone for 26 degrees on Thursday in the London area. So before this point, as we follow this diagonal line, as the air is rising, it's following a dry adiabatic lapse rate. The air is still quite dry, but once we reach this point, the air is now saturated. So we follow this curved line, a saturated adiabatic lapse rate, it's called. Stay with me. I promise this will hopefully make sense in a minute. But what this shows us is this grey shaded area, and that is the convective available potential energy, CAPE for short. And this actually is indicating, so here's the base of our cloud, here's roughly the top of our cloud. So we can see this cloud is pretty deep. It's roughly the base around 5,000 foot. The top of the cloud's probably around 30,000 foot if we follow this axis along. Here's the kind of height of the atmosphere as we go up. So that is a really thick cloud. Instantly, when you'd look at this, you'd think a cumulonimbus cloud. And this shaded area is telling us basically the potential of how convective that cloud could be. So if it's going to be a convective cloud, a cumulonimbus cloud, we're looking at showers, we're looking at the possibility of hail and thunder. So instantly as a forecaster, you'd be looking at this, and this is what we call skinny cape. So there is enough energy here to create a shower. Now already we've looked at the setup, we know showers are on the cards, there's a risk of showers, but we want to know how intense those showers are going to be and if we have a risk of thunderstorms. And this is something I actually learned through here in the Met Office College. This is one of our empirical techniques that we might be able to use. Usually here in Exeter, if you are forecasting, particularly on the aviation bench, you're looking after quite a few airports, so you don't always have time to use techniques like this. But if you're just forecasting for one airport or a defence base, for example, you might want to use this just to kind of look at how intense your showers could possibly be. So I've already drawn on these red lines here. So as I said, this is the base of the cloud along the x-axis, and then the top of the cloud along the y-axis. So around 5,000 feet, and then the top of our cloud was around 30,000 feet. And this is indicating a heavy shower, which we already guessed anyway. So a heavy shower is definitely on the cards just by taking a look at that tephigram. And there's a few rules here indicating how intense that rain's going to be, what your visibility could potentially look like with regards to how intense that shower could be. And depending on the type of cloud it is, so if it's a cumulus cloud, a cumulonimbus cloud, a towering Q, for example, that's more of our convective cloud. So that changes how intense the precipitation could be compared to more dynamic clouds. That's more of your frontal cloud moving through. So there's lots of different rules. I won't go through them all. But a good one is that if the depth of the cloud is more than 10,000 feet, you've got around a 90% of showers. This is taken for the London area, so across the southeast. So we've got a good 90% chance of showers already just by looking at that tephigram. Another thing we can look at, here's a tephigram once again on our smaller scale. So this was our solid blue line on the last one, this black one here, and this is our SALR, saturated adiabatic lapse rate. And do you remember we were looking at that kind of grey shaded area? And in order for hail, if we're looking at that tephigram and we're thinking about hail, there needs to be about a 4-degree separation or more in between the temperature of our environment and also that SALR, that curved line in that shaded area. And if we go back to our tephigram, we can kind of see there's roughly about 4 degrees there. It's probably about 3 to 4 degrees separation there. So already we're thinking that there is the possibility of hail there. And in order to determine the kind of risk of thunder, here at the Met Office, if you're forecasting through civil aviation, you tend to really rely on model runs to see the kind of risk of thunder. But already we know we've got a cumulonimbus cloud, we know we've got a risk of hail, we know we've got a heavy shower coming. So you can probably guess that there's a good chance of thunderstorms here as well. And we have a few different instability indices that we could use. There's a good 4 or 5 here that we could use. For example, Ratcliffe is quite a popular one. So we would take a look at our potential temperature at 1,000 hectopascals. So what the temperature would be if that parcel of air was brought down to the ground with no moisture or no heat added, it was just moved down adiabatically. So we want the temperature there. And then we take off the temperature around about 500 hectopascals. I hope this is making sense. It sounds very complicated as I'm saying it. And here this kind of indices shows that if we take away those numbers, it's around 29 to 30, that means that there's thunder probable. And I did already calculate this because it was a little bit complicated to do. And I think the number, there we go, nice and big. The number was about 30.8. And this is indicating thunder probable about 29 to 30. So there's definitely a chance of thunderstorms looking at that tephigram. We've got all the ingredients there. But as we've already noted, looking at the kind of different models, it's just whereabouts those thunderstorms are going to be. So that's where the uncertainty lies. We know we've got the ingredients for a thunderstorm to be created. It's just whereabouts that location is going to be. I really hope that made sense. But yeah, I think it's sometimes quite interesting to look at, because obviously we talk about models a lot, we talk about the differences in the model runs and between the different models that we use here at the Met Office, but sometimes I think it's nice to kind of go back to the basics and really take a look at what we use here. If we didn't have any models at all, what we could actually look at to see if thunderstorms were on the card. So I hope that made sense, but if not, please do leave some questions in the comment section and we can maybe take a look at it on the live on Friday. So I think that was pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. So I hope you have enjoyed this week's deep dive. I've not done it in a while, so I've kind of forgotten how exactly to explain certain things. But I think hopefully that all made sense. And I think it's really interesting to take a look at how everything links together, how the jet stream can potentially pull in some weather systems all the way from the US, how the position of the jet can impact weather here in the UK and towards Europe, and how that change in jet stream creates a change in where that high pressure can sit, and thus having an effect on weather further ahead. So I hope you did enjoy it. I hope it made sense. And yes, please do leave any comments or questions in the comment section below. But otherwise, I hope you have enjoyed. Make sure you have clicked subscribe. Make sure to give this video a like. And of course, like I said earlier, we're across all social media, including Spotify. So make sure to give us a follow there as well. Then you won't miss our faces. And if you want more information on the weather further ahead, particularly the chances of thunderstorms on Thursday or the chance of that low pressure system moving through next week, well, we've got Alex Burkill tomorrow on the 10-day trend here on YouTube as well. And hopefully by tomorrow, we'll have a bit more information with regards to potential warnings for this week or the kind of what weather we could be looking at next week as well. So don't forget to take a look at that one tomorrow as well. But otherwise, that is it from me. So I'll catch you again very soon.